I was 10 when I first heard about a child prodigy from 1849 who claimed to have solved death itself, using only math. A forgotten genius, barely a teenager, scribbling equations that could unravel life's greatest mystery. It sounded impossible, like a fairy tale, but the deeper I dug, the more I found. Cryptic journals, hidden formulas, and a story that could change how we see existence. What if a kid really cracked the code to immortality? Stick with me for the next few minutes as I uncover the astonishing tale of a mathematical miracle and the equations that might still be out there, waiting to be rediscovered. I stumbled across the story in an old, dusty archive, buried under stacks of forgotten manuscripts. It was a journal from 1849, written by a child named Eliza Hawthorne, just 12 years old. Her words were precise, almost mechanical, describing death as a problem to be solved. She didn't see it as a mystery or a spiritual void, but as a mathematical equation. Her confidence was unnerving, page after page of numbers, symbols, and diagrams, all claiming to map the boundary between life and death. I couldn't stop reading. How could a child think this way? What drove her to believe death was just a puzzle? Her journal hinted at experiments, late-night calculations, and a mind far beyond her years. I felt like I was holding a secret the world had overlooked. Eliza's work wasn't just a curiosity. It was a challenge to everything we assume about mortality. I had to know more. Was this real, or just the wild imagination of a gifted kid? Eliza's story began in a small New England town where she was known as the quiet prodigy. Her father, a schoolteacher, noticed her talent early. She could solve complex algebra by age 6. By 10, she was reading Newton and Leibniz, devouring texts most adults couldn't grasp. But it wasn't just math that obsessed her, it was life itself. She wrote about watching her grandmother die and wondering why no one could fix it. That moment sparked something in her, a refusal to accept death as inevitable. Her journal described death as a system of variables, like a machine with rules to be decoded. I could almost feel her determination through the pages. She wasn't afraid. She was curious. I wondered what it must have been like to live with such a mind, to see the world as a series of solvable problems. Her equations were her rebellion against fate. The deeper I dug, the stranger things got. Eliza's journal mentioned a mentor, a reclusive mathematician named Dr. Amos Crane. He was a fringe figure, shunned by academia for his radical ideas about quantifying existence. Crane believed life and death were governed by universal laws, expressible in numbers. Eliza became his apprentice, sneaking away at night to study with him. Together, they crafted equations that supposedly modeled the transition of vitality. I tried to imagine their meetings, candlelit rooms, chalkboards filled with symbols, a child and an outcast chasing immortality. Crane's influence was clear in her work, but her ideas went further. She wasn't just parroting him, she was building something new. I felt a chill realizing how close they might have come to something extraordinary. Eliza's equations weren't random scribbles. They followed a logic I could barely follow. She described life as a finite energy state, and death as a redistribution of that energy. Her formulas used calculus and early probability theory, blending them in ways I'd never seen. I'm no mathematician, but even I could tell her work was meticulous. She broke down biological processes into numerical patterns, predicting decay and renewal. It was like she was mapping the soul with math. I kept wondering, how did a 12-year-old conceive this? Her journal hinted at sleepless nights, fevers, and a growing obsession. She wrote about seeing the numbers in her dreams. I couldn't shake the image of a child alone, chasing answers to questions no one else dared ask. The townsfolk didn't understand her. They called her strange, even cursed, for questioning God's plan. Eliza didn't care. She was too focused. Her journal described experiments with plants and small animals, tracking their life cycles with numbers. She measured growth rates, decay, even the moment of death, all reduced to data points. It felt eerie, almost cold, but her precision was undeniable. She believed every living thing followed a mathematical rhythm. I started to see her not as a child, but as a scientist, unbound by the limits of her time. Her work was centuries ahead, yet no one noticed. How could something this groundbreaking stay hidden? I felt a mix of awe and frustration reading her words. By 1849, Eliza was racing against time. Her journal entries grew frantic. She was sick, coughing up blood, likely tuberculosis. She wrote about finishing the equation before it was too late. Her illness wasn't just a backdrop. It was the fuel for her work. Death was no longer abstract. It was coming for her. I could feel her urgency in every line, her pen scratching faster as her strength faded. She believed her equations could redirect the energy of death. I didn't know whether to admire her or pity her. Was she delusional, or did she really see something the rest of us couldn't? Her determination was haunting, like she was trying to outrun her own mortality with numbers. Dr. Crane disappeared that same year, leaving Eliza alone. Rumors swirled that he'd gone mad or fled to Europe. Without him, Eliza's work became even more secretive. She hid her journals, fearing they'd be destroyed by those who didn't understand. I found references to a locked box where she kept her final equations. That box became my obsession. Did it still exist? Could it hold the key to her discoveries? I imagined it tucked away in some attic, filled with papers that could rewrite science. Eliza's isolation made her story even more compelling. She was a child against the world, protecting a truth no one was ready for. Her final journal entry was dated December 1849. It was short, just a few lines, but it hit me hard. She wrote, "The equation is complete. Death is only a change of state." That was it. No explanation, no triumph, just quiet certainty. I sat there, staring at the page, wondering what she meant. Did she solve it? Did she find a way to cheat death? The journal ended abruptly, and historical records show she died shortly after, at 13. Her death certificate listed tuberculosis, but I couldn't help feeling there was more to it. Her words lingered, like a puzzle I couldn't solve. I needed to know if her equations were real. I started searching for the locked box, chasing leads in old libraries and estate sales. Historians I contacted had never heard of Eliza Hawthorne. Her name was a footnote, if that, but I found traces, letters mentioning a prodigy's papers sold at auction in the 1880s. The trail went cold, but the idea of her equations kept me up at night. What if they were still out there, hidden in some forgotten collection? I imagined scientists today, with modern tools, deciphering her work. Could her formulas predict biological processes we're only now beginning to understand? The possibility felt too big to ignore, like a secret the universe was hiding. Eliza's story wasn't just about math. It was about defying limits. She saw death not as an end, but as a problem to be solved. Her courage, her refusal to accept the inevitable, changed how I think about life. I started to wonder, what other mysteries could we solve if we approached them with her fearless curiosity? Her equations, if they exist, might hold answers we're not ready for. I felt a responsibility to share her story, to make sure her genius wasn't forgotten. That's why I'm telling you this now, because Eliza Hawthorne deserves to be remembered, and her work deserves to be found. My search took me to a small historical society in Massachusetts, where I found a letter mentioning Eliza's family. It was written by her cousin, who called her touched by madness. The letter described how Eliza's parents burned most of her papers after her death, fearing they were blasphemous. My heart sank reading that, years of work gone. But the cousin mentioned a metal box saved from the fire, hidden by Eliza's younger brother. That box again. It was real, and it might still be out there. I could almost picture it, rusted but intact, holding secrets the world wasn't ready for in 1849. I needed to find it, to see if her equation survived. I started studying the math Eliza used, hoping to understand her mind. Her journals referenced differential equations and probability, but in ways that felt almost alien. She treated life like a dynamic system, with variables for energy, time, and decay. I reached out to a mathematician friend, who was stunned by the sophistication of her work. He said her ideas resembled modern systems biology, a field that didn't exist in her time. That confirmation hit me hard. Eliza wasn't just a prodigy. She was a pioneer. I wondered how much further she could have gone with today's tools. Her equations felt like a bridge between her world and ours. The more I learned, the more I saw Eliza as a tragic hero. She was racing against death, Not just for herself, but for everyone. Her journal described a vision of a world where death could be managed, like a disease. It wasn't about immortality in the mythical sense, but about extending life through math. I found myself admiring her audacity. Who thinks like that at 12? Her work was a rebellion against nature itself. But it also made me sad. She was so young, so alone, carrying a burden no one else understood. I wanted to reach back in time and tell her she wasn't crazy. I tracked down a descendant of Eliza's brother, hoping for clues about the box. He was an old man, skeptical but curious. He remembered family stories about a cursed trunk passed down through generations. My pulse raced. Could this be it? He didn't know where it was, but he mentioned an old farmhouse with family-stored heirlooms. I drove there the next day, heart pounding, imagining what I might find. The farmhouse was crumbling, but in the attic, I found boxes of old papers. None were Eliza's, but the search felt alive. Her equations were out there, calling to me. Back home, I dove into Eliza's surviving notes, trying to recreate her equations. They were incomplete, but the fragments were breathtaking. She used recursive functions to model life cycles, predicting when a system, like a body, would fail. It was like she was programming biology before computers existed. I felt out of my depth, but I couldn't stop. Her work was a puzzle, and I was hooked. I started to see patterns in her numbers, hints of something universal. Could her equations apply to modern medicine? To aging? The possibilities were dizzying, and I wasn't the only one who thought so. I shared Eliza's story with a group of historians and scientists online, and it sparked a firestorm. Some called her a genius. Others said she was delusional. But a few, mostly mathematicians, saw what I saw, potential. They started analyzing her equations, trying to fill in the gaps. One suggested her work might align with chaos theory, another with quantum biology. I didn't understand all the details, but their excitement was contagious. Eliza's ideas, written by a child in 1849, were inspiring experts today. I felt like I was part of something bigger, a movement to uncover a lost truth. The search for the box hit a dead end, but I didn't give up. I found records of an auction in 1901 where a mathematical relic was sold to a private collector. It could be Eliza's. I contacted museums, collectors, anyone who might know. Most dismissed me, but one curator mentioned a peculiar manuscript in a London archive. I booked a flight, driven by the thought of holding Eliza's work in my hands. The archive was a maze of papers, but I found nothing. Still, the trip wasn't a loss. It made Eliza's story feel more real, more urgent. I was chasing history, and I wasn't alone. Online, Eliza's story was gaining traction. People were fascinated by the idea of a child solving death with math. Forums buzzed with theories, some practical, some wild. One user claimed her equations could explain consciousness. Another said they predicted cellular decay. I didn't know what to believe, but I loved the energy. Eliza was no longer a footnote. She was a phenomenon. I started a blog to share her story, posting scans of her journal. Readers sent me tips, leads, even their own calculations. It felt like a global treasure hunt, with Eliza's equations as the prize. I began to see Eliza's work as more than just math. It was a philosophy. She believed everything could be understood through numbers, even the human soul. Her journal described life as a temporary equilibrium, death as a shift to a new state. It was poetic, almost spiritual, despite her rigid logic. I started to wonder if she was right. Could we quantify existence? Could we predict our own end? Her ideas challenged me to think bigger, to question what I thought I knew. I wasn't just searching for her equations. I was searching for meaning. Late one night, I found a breakthrough, a reference to a Hawthorne manuscript in a university library. It wasn't the box, but it was something. I contacted the library, and they confirmed they had a document attributed to Eliza. My hands shook as I waited for a scan. When it arrived, it was just a single page, but it was hers, filled with equations, just like her journal. The numbers danced across the page, precise and alive. I didn't understand them, but I felt their power. This was proof. Eliza's work wasn't a myth. It was real, and it was waiting to be understood. That single page changed everything. I sent it to my mathematician friend, who called it revolutionary. He said Eliza's equations hinted at a unified model of biological decay and regeneration. It wasn't a cure for death, but it was a step toward understanding it. I felt a rush of pride for her, a girl who'd been forgotten for so long. Her work was finally being seen. I started to imagine what she could have done with more time, more resources. Would she have changed the world? I believed she could have. Her page was a spark, and I was determined to keep it burning. The more I shared Eliza's story, the more it resonated. People saw her as a symbol of defiance, a child who refused to accept the inevitable. Her equations, even incomplete, inspired scientists to rethink aging and disease. One researcher told me her work could inform new models for cellular repair. I was amazed. Her ideas, from 1849, were shaping modern science. I felt like I was carrying her torch, bringing her voice back to life. But I still hadn't found the box. It haunted me, the idea that her full equations were still out there, waiting. I started to wonder about Eliza's final days. Her journal didn't say much, but I imagined her writing furiously, knowing time was running out. Did she feel satisfied, believing she'd solved the puzzle? Or was she frustrated, knowing her work was incomplete? I wished I could talk to her, ask her what she saw in those numbers. Her story felt personal now, like she was a friend I'd never met. I wanted to honor her, to make sure her genius wasn't lost again. That meant finding the box, no matter how long it took. The search led me to a collector in Scotland who claimed to have a mathematical artifact from the 19th century. He wouldn't say much, but he agreed to meet. I flew out, heart racing, hoping this was it. He showed me a small iron box, rusted but intact. My breath caught. Was this Eliza's? Inside were papers, but they weren't hers. They were from another mathematician, decades later. Disappointment hit hard, but the collector gave me a lead. A library in Paris with a peculiar collection. I was back on the hunt, fueled by the thought of Eliza's equations. In Paris, I found nothing, but the trip wasn't wasted. I met a historian who specialized in 19th century prodigies. She'd heard of Eliza and confirmed her story wasn't unique. Other children had tackled big questions, only to be forgotten. But Eliza stood out for her focus on death. The historian called her a singular mind, lost to time. I didn't want her to stay lost. I started a podcast to share her story, hoping it would reach someone who knew about the box. Every episode felt like a letter to Eliza, a promise to keep her legacy alive. The podcast took off, and listeners sent me new leads. One pointed to a private collection in New York, where a child's equations were stored. I contacted the owner, who was skeptical but intrigued. He let me see the papers, and for a moment, I thought I'd found it. The handwriting was similar, but the equations were different, less ambitious, less Eliza. Still, the search was changing me. I was no longer just a curious researcher. I was a storyteller, determined to give Eliza the place in history she deserved. I began to see parallels between Eliza's work and modern science. Her equations, with their focus on energy and decay, echoed research in thermodynamics and biophysics. I wasn't a scientist, but I could see the connections. Her ideas were like seeds, planted long before the world was ready. I wondered what she'd think of today's technology. Would she be thrilled, or would she think we're still missing the point? Her journal suggested she believed math could unlock everything. I wanted to believe her, to think we could still find her answers. The hunt for the box became a metaphor for me. It wasn't just about finding papers. It was about chasing the impossible. Eliza didn't accept limits, and neither could I. Her story taught me to question, to push, to believe in the unlikely. I started working with a team of volunteers, historians, mathematicians, even a few psychics, who wanted to find her equations. We called ourselves Eliza's Seekers, a nod to her relentless curiosity. Together, we scoured archives, followed leads, and shared her story with the world. As I write this, I haven't found the box, but I haven't given up. Every lead, every dead end, brings me closer to Eliza. Her equations, even if lost, have already changed me. They've shown me that genius can come from anywhere, even a child in 1849. I believe her work is out there, waiting to be found, and I'll keep looking. Her story isn't over, it's just beginning. I want you to join me, to help uncover the truth. Eliza Hawthorne solved death like math, and her equations could still change the world. So here I am, sharing her story with you. Eliza's life was short, but her ideas were timeless. She saw death not as an end, but as a puzzle, and she dared to solve it. Her equations might hold answers we can't yet imagine about life, death, or something even bigger. I'm still searching, and I need your help. If you know anything about a lockbox, a prodigy's papers, or a forgotten genius, reach out. Together, we can bring Eliza's work back to light. Her story deserves to be told, and her equations deserve to be found. If this story moved you, if you're as fascinated by Eliza as I am, subscribe to my channel. Join me on this journey to uncover her equations and share the stories of forgotten geniuses. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's keep digging for the truth together. Who knows? The next clue could come from you.